Veni Creator Spiritus, mentes tuorum visita.
The family in the teachings of the Catholic Church. My dear brothers and sisters, this is not a thorough and systematic analysis of all aspects of the family in the teaching of the Catholic Church, but just an attempt to share a few aspects that, in my view, could be essential to understand the family, and especially now that the family is besieged with so many difficulties. But let me share immediately with you some references for further reading. First Vatican II, in the document Gaudium et Spes, Article 46 to 52, and in Lumen Gentium, Article 11, Pope Paul VI, Humanae Vitae, John Paul II, Apostolic Exhortation on the Family, Familiaris Consortio, and also a couple of books, The Theology of the Body, Love and Responsibility, and there is also a charter on family rights published by the Holy See in 1983. Pope Francis, Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, Love in the Family, a few articles in the canon law on matrimony, and also the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the one promulgated by St. John Paul II in 1994. Let us take note right away that we cannot talk of the family without talking of marriage, because it is through marriage that the family is established. It happens that many documents, when they address the topic of the family, they jump automatically on marriage, but even though the two are inseparably connected, so they can be distinguished. According to the new shorter Oxford Dictionary of the English Language, Volume 1, the family is understood as a group of people constituting of one set of parents and their children, whether living together or not, or any group of people connected by blood or other relationship. In this reflection, we choose to consider only the family as that unit of husband and wife and children. This kind of cell community, which we can call the basis for both the society and the church. Vatican II calls the family the domestic church. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, if we consider the family in the scripture, we have a few passages that are known to most of us, I think to all of us. And we can repeat what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says first, that in creating man and woman, God created the family. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, he said that God created the human being at his image, male and female. He created them. Then he blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and be masters of other creatures." In his image, God created us. And the Bible specifies us, male and female. Both are created in the image of God. And God has blessed them to be fruitful, to have the gift of children, and to be masters of creation. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 to 25, it is another narrative where we see how God created the woman from the rib of the man. But also he said that God, when he presented the woman to Adam expressed himself, he says, "Finally, this is the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bones, which is really a very spectacular and profound expression, which shows the equality between man and woman, except in their differences of masculinity and femininity, and that they are called to complementarity. And it is remarkable to see the conclusion of that passage, which says, that is why man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two become one flesh. As we know, leaving his father and mother is not just for the man, actually it is for both. Whether the man or the woman, they shall leave aside their family, their mother and mother, and be united to become one in their own family. In Matthew 19, 3 to 12, Jesus recalled God's design, saying that from the beginning, God created them male and female, man and woman, and called them to be united forever. That unity is indissoluble. So in Matthew also, chapter 5, 27 to 32, Jesus teaches about purity, and then shows that divorce should not take place, and that it is illicit, it is sinful to marry a divorced person, but that marriage has been meant to be permanent unless it will be an illicit or unlawful marriage. Later, St. Paul in the letter to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 22 to chapter 6, verse 4, and St. Peter in his first letter, chapter 3, verse 1 to 7, will explain that relationship between husband and wife. And let me say that, especially in the Ephesians, even in the letter of St. Peter, that the expression of the wife being submissive to her husband or obedient to her husband has been like shocking many. But we have to take it into the context, because it's not about domination of the male over the female, of the husband over the wife. In fact, St. John Paul II uses beautiful expression saying that it is about mutual obedience between a man and a woman. And when you look at the preamble, a very short but very important preamble in the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians, verse 22, chapter 5, verse 22, he says that they should be submitted one to the other out of reverence for Christ. So it's not just the woman who is submitted to the man, but the man also submitted to the woman out of reverence to Christ. In any way, when we follow St. Paul and see that he commends that man should love his wife as Christ loved the church, I don't think there is any room in that kind of love for domination or enslavement of the woman. So, obviously, if man has been like dominating the woman, that can be a consequence, of course, of sin, and also in some cultures which are not evangelized, that could be just the result of concupiscence, but it's not what God wanted when he created man and woman. What can we say then from the teachings of the church on the family? Basically, the church magisterium about the family is rooted in the revelation that we find in the sacred scriptures and tradition. However, some theologians point out that in the early times of the church, not much was said about the family, because the emphasis was rather on the calling of the Lord to leave father and mother, brothers and sisters, children and properties so as to follow Jesus. And that made people put forward first the new family, which is the church. In our times, especially with Vatican II, the concept of vocation is better understood, showing how all the members of God's people share the same dignity through their baptism, same dignity as God's children, and according to their vocation, and that they have a share in the common or baptismal priesthood, each according to their vocation. So, recognizing God's work in the family and in the family's participation in the role of evangelization, the church can then call the family domestic church. All this can be seen if we consider a few aspects of how the church teaching on the family unfolds. I have here a very precious passage which is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Article 2201 and the following. They are just so amazing. In 2201, it says, "The conjugal community is established upon the consent of the spouses. Marriage and family are ordered to the good of the spouses and to the procreation and education of the children. The love of the spouses and the begetting of the children create among members of the same family personal relationship and primordial responsibilities." This quotation can be found in Canon 1055, basically like the same thing, except that in that canon it's precise that Christ has elevated the matrimony to the dignity of the sacrament, of a sacrament. So it says, "The matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, and which is ordered by its nature to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of the offspring, has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament between the baptized." I found that was amazing how the canon law defines the marriage. Anyway, let me share with you also another few passages, especially a spectacular passage from Gaudium et Spes in Article 48, which it says, "Christ the Lord abundantly blessed this Christ the Lord abundantly blessed Christ the Lord abundantly bless this manifested love, welling up as it does from the fountain of divine love, and structured as it is on the model of his union with his church. For as God of old made himself present to his people through a covenant of love and fidelity, so now the Savior of men and the spouse of the church comes into the lives of married Christians through the sacrament of matrimony. He abides with them thereafter, so that just as he loved the church and handed himself over on her behalf, the spouses may love each other with perpetual fidelity through mutual self-bestowal." Amazing, right? And in the end of the paragraph 48, the Vatican's the document Gaudium et Spes says, Thus, the Christian family, which springs from marriage as a relation of loving covenant uniting Christ with the church, and as a participation in that covenant, will manifest to all men Christ's living presence in the world and the genuine nature of the church. This the family will do by the mutual love of the spouses, by their generous fruitfulness, their solidarity and faithfulness, and by the loving way in which all members of the family assist one another. So it shows that there are these relationships not only between the spouses but also between the parents and the children, and of course between the siblings, which shows this harmony of love. You know, to me, it's good that I should underline that the family is the haven of love and life. That's the destination of life, of the family. I would like to share then a short passage from Lumen Gentium in the middle of Article 11. It says, "Those of the faithful who are consecrated by holy orders are appointed to feed the church Christ's name with the word and the grace of God. Finally, Christian spouses, in virtue of the sacrament of matrimony, whereby they signify and partake of the mystery of that unity in their married life and in the rearing and education of their children, by reason of their state and rank in life, they have their own special gift among the people of God. From the wedlock of Christian, there comes the family, in which new citizens of human society are born, who, by the grace of the Holy Spirit, received in baptism, are made children of God, thus perpetuating the people of God through the centuries. The family is, so to speak, the domestic church. In it, parents should, by their word and example, be the first preachers of the faith to their children. They should encourage them in the vocation which is proper to each of them, fostering with special care vocation to a sacred state." So, basically, in the Lumen Gentium, the whole vision started about, the people of God, and, talking, for instance, of the hierarchy, the religious, the lay people, and how each of the baptized has a vocation, and that the family is not left behind, has also its dignity, and because of these wonders that God does in the family, that it is truly a domestic church, and it's just spectacular. So, if we may back up, we can talk a little bit of that consent of the spouses, which establish the conjugal community. That's the essence of marriage, that a man and woman of their own free will accept to live together and make that community of love. Let me open a little parenthesis here, because some people question the church about annulment. At least among my faithful here at St. John the 23rd, I've had some people ask, "Father, how did the church come to do annulment?" And I said, to understand the process of annulment is to realize that sometimes the consent that's supposed to be given freely among among the spouses maybe not so free at the time they gave the consent. Could be a lot of influences. So when the consent is defective, that's when the marriage also can be defective and may be annulled. So the conjugal community is established upon the consent of the spouses, freely, consciously, and really willingly, to establish that community of love. And it is established for the good of the spouses. So marriage is for the good of the spouses, first and foremost, and then also for the procreation and education of the offspring. It is striking that the church did not separate those, for instance, mentioning only procreation and omit education. No, the church is saying procreation and education of the offspring, because they go together. There is responsibilities of the parents toward the children. And if you like, in this last reflection, last paragraph, I would like to reflect on some difficulties and challenges that concern the family life in our times. First of all, divorce, because the rate of divorce is very high, even among Catholics. I apologize that I did not get to go to the statistics, but everyone knows that divorce is very common, even among the baptized. And divorce, of course, go against the family. We can see in general that sometimes there could be a lack of proper formation in family matters. And I have to admire the church in the United States that recommend that we do not marry people in haste, but that we give them time to prepare, to meet the priest or the deacon, whoever is in charge of preparing them, that we take time of 6 months at least, so that there could be a kind of formation, and that several sessions are set to prepare the couple, fiancés, before they can get married, to understand, for instance, about the natural planning, to understand the religious life in the family, to understand the education of the family. So when, in unfortunate cases, there is not enough formation, that could be a danger for the good of the family, because the family can break down. So among other difficulties that we see in the family, there is poverty. When a family is living in poor economic conditions, there could be a lot of problems. For instance, the husband might want to emigrate to another country or another city to work, to earn some income, but in the process, the family can suffer greatly. On the other hand, one of the saddest situation I heard from some country, I won't reveal the name, but for real, is that there are cases where parents can push their children to do prostitution so as to earn income. Sometimes girls of a young age, like 11, 12, or 13. So that's extremely painful to see that a family would resort to such practice in order to have some income. We're talking also of addictions, of all kinds of addictions, like addiction to alcohol, drugs, pornography, work, game, sex, and so forth. And let me point out the addiction of pornography, because it is becoming more and more extended in families, because those wrong images are accessible in the computers or phones and so forth, but they distort the true love of between husband and wife. And many then have the wrong idea because of those images. They also create a problem between husband and wife if one of them is addicted to pornography. So they can bring the family a tremendous problem. And usually also pornography goes with masturbation or those kind of evils. So they are against the family. I should also mention particularly games, because with the technology, there are all kinds of games available, and they can also be a grave danger for the family. One of the cases I can mention is for the youth, that by doing games, they do games by night, and then they don't sleep enough, and the following day cannot function, cannot study, and you see them in a few cases that they live like vegetables, depending on their mom and dad to survive, and bring nothing of their talents, of their studies from the community. So games can be very dangerous, addiction to games. But also in connection with that, one can mention the new technologies which allow to have those games or other occupations. What happens is that the new technologies allow each individual in the family to do his own thing, to be busy with his own thing, and then the family does not meet to get together, for instance, for a meal, for a conversation, and so forth. So they live together under the same roof, but have nothing in common, because each one is, live an individualistic life because of the games, because of technology, because of many things. And those could be grave dangers also for the unity of the family, for the harmony of the family. And other things that we may mention that are a challenge and problem for the family are the confusion about the true nature of marriage and gender. Nowadays, we see many governments all over the world allow what they call same-sex marriage. Of course, it's not marriage, it's maybe a kind of relationship, partnership, whatever. So many people get confused, and it is a danger because there is no right understanding of marriage. And people think that if they feel attraction to a person of the same sex, they can just marry that person. But it's not marriage. So the attraction between sexes can exist, but to be truly what Jesus wants, there should be no sexual relationship between a man and a man and a man and a woman. Because as he says, from the beginning, God created man and woman. The design of God has been that a man should be united with a woman and not the contrary, not a man with a man or a woman with a woman. So that's a tremendous danger for the family nowadays. And in addition, a homosexual relationship is not open to life because it cannot generate life. So there is a great danger there for the family in our days. And then also the gender identity, because if one is born a man or a woman, that's who he is or who she is. We cannot just want to change. If you are born a man, become a woman, or if you are born a woman, want it to become a man. All those are problems for the family in our days. Anyway, we should mention, before we finish this, the danger of abortion, which is directly against life, while the marriage should be a gift of love and life. So abortion kills life, and that's very dangerous. It have tremendous effect on the family, especially on the one who has committed abortion. And it is a need of our society that we have to fight hard so that to nurture the culture of life, not the culture of death. Let me mention also maybe another aspect that many do not see as a problem, but we should mention also premarital relationships and the cohabitation. In premarital relationship, those young people think that they know about the relation, but they just together for sexual relationships, but with no commitment to life. That's why when accident happens, if one of them if the girl becomes pregnant, as well the danger for abortion comes in. Also, when they separate, the emotions of feeling rejected, of feeling like failed relationship is a kind of sad thing, because in general in our culture those relationships are like accepted as if they were kind of normal, but it's a very wrong preparation for married life. And then you have cohabitation, where that man and woman seem to be in a stable relationship, but without any contract, any commitment to one another. Because one thing is, to have sexual relationship. Another thing is to commit to one another and accept the consequences of a relationship. And beside, it is the teachings of the church that marriage should be protected by state laws and by church laws. So it's a covenant, it's a contract between the two. So it cannot be just lived like in a private way. It is wrong. And that living it in a private way can raise problems in the future. Raise problems, for instance, when they separate about their common properties or whatever, or in the case of health assistance, who assists who all those kind of things. So it's no good to cohabitate, because many do so to avoid the danger, sometimes to avoid also having children, to avoid the responsibility, and to avoid the children. So it is contrary to the family, which has to be a covenant of love and be open to life. Finally, I would like to finish off by saying how it is beautiful to see the amazing blessing that God has given to us, to humankind, in the family, in the matrimonial love. It's an amazing blessing, and the church does point out that the blessing of matrimony has not been forfeited by original sin, nor taken away by the floods, which shows that this blessing of matrimony has stayed. But when we look at the beauty of the family in general, truly we should praise God for the gift of the family, and all of which is a heaven of love and life. That's how we call it. The family is truly a heaven of love and life. In other words, it is that union bonded together through love, but also is the source of love and life for those who live in the family. And we can understand in that way why Christ elevated the matrimony to the dignity of a sacrament, because it truly shows that love of Christ for the church, and it is a source of love and life. Through the gift of the family, God is made manifest. That's why I also can call it the domestic church. Domestic church, therefore, a kind of sacrament for humankind. And not to omit, for instance, that in the family, that's where the human being is shaped with values, both human and religious and so forth. So the family is an amazing gift of God to humankind. And let me also mention that to be able to understand how the family, the Christian family should be, I think we have to look up to Saint Joseph, to Mary and Jesus, to the family of Nazareth. That family of Nazareth is a great inspiration to our families. Thank you for your kind attention for this talk, and hopefully we hear some feedback about this talk on the family. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.